Hey everybody, happy Friday. Okay, so we are finishing Ramona the Brave today. So where we left off was that she she had been running down the street on her new adventurous way, and she came across a dog that was started like sort of to attack her. So she threw her lunchbox at him, and then it wasn't enough. So she threw her one of her shoes. So she gets into the classroom and she doesn't have one of her shoes. And of course, it's the day that Mrs. Griggs is going to ask her to come up and do the Pledge of Allegiance to the class. So so Susan is actually being kind to her and sort of being empathetic and feeling for what it would be like to be Ramona, and she feels bad. So it's kind of like a good part of their relationship right now. Uh, so Ramona didn't want to have to wear the boots or the extra shoe, that random shoe or something that Mrs. Griggs has for kids when something happens to their shoes or something. So she's trying. So she has a bunch of paper towel right now, and she's trying to figure out um, how to make that into like a slipper shoe with the paper towel. But she says that she needs a stapler. So now she's analyzing all the ways that she could possibly get a stapler to finish her slipper. So I like you guys have some really funny predictions. Um, a lot of you think that she's going to sneak into a classroom for the stapler. Some think she'll get caught. Some think that another teacher will sort of find her or say, like, what are you doing with that? Mrs. Griggs, Miss Binney. Um, some people think that maybe she'll take another material, not the paper towel. Um, that she'll go to Miss Binney's class and sneak the stapler. Okay, so this is what happens. Nice job, you guys. Oh, and Epi, I hope you're feeling better. You said you were sick, but now you're feeling better. So I hope you are. All right. So this says, no one would see the brave thing she was about to do. Ramona climbed the stairs to the first landing, where she paused to take a fresh grip on her courage. She had never gone to the upstairs hall alone. First graders rarely ventured there, unless accompanied by their parents on open house night. She felt small and frightened, but she held fast to her courage as she ran up the second half of the flight of stairs. Ramona found Mr. Cardoza's room. She quietly opened the door a crack. Mr. Cardoza was telling his class, "Spelling secretary is easy. Just remember, the first part of the word is secret, and think of a secretary as someone who keeps secrets. You will never again spell the word with two A's instead of two E's." Ramona opened the door a little wider and peeked inside. How big the desks looked compared to her own down in room one. She heard the whir of a wheel spinning in a mouse's cage. Mr. Cardosa came to investigate. He opened the door wider and said, "Hello, Ramona Q. What may we do for you?" There was Ramona standing on one foot, trying to hide her dirty sock behind her shoe, while Beezus' whole class, and especially Beezus, stared at her. Besides her classmates, Beezus did not look so big as Ramona had always thought her to be. Ramona was secretly pleased to discover her sister was a little less than medium sized. Ramona wondered how Beezus would report this scene at home. "Mother!" The door opened and there was Ramona standing with one shoe on. Ramona refused to let her courage fail her. She remembered her manners and asked, "May I please borrow your stapler?" "I can use it right here in the hall, and it will only take a minute." Once again, she had that strange feeling of standing aside to look at herself. Was she a funny little girl whom Mr. Cardoza would find amusing? Apparently not, because Mr. Cardoza did not hesitate. "Certainly," he said, and strode to his desk for the stapler, which he handed to her without question. Mrs. Griggs would have said, "Tell me why you want it, Ramona." Miss Binney would have said, "Won't you let me help you with it?" Mr. Cardoza closed the door, leaving Ramona in the privacy of the hall. Ramona knelt on the floor and went to work. She stapled the three paper towels together. The towels folded in thirds, she placed at one end of the other towels and stapled it on three sides to make the toe of a slipper. She had to push down hard with both hands to force the staples through so much paper. Then she turned her slipper over and sent staples through the air. I'm sorry, through the other direction to make it stronger. There. Ramona slid her foot into her slipper. With more time and a pair of scissors, she could have made a better slipper with a rounded toe. But this slipper was better than any old boot, and it should last all day. School paper towels being what they were. We know that, right? Ramona opened the door again and held out the stapler. Mr. Cardoza looked up from the book in his hand and walked over to take the stapler from her. Thank you, Mr. Cardoza, she said, because she knew he expected good manners. You're welcome, Ramona Q, said Mr. Cardoza with a smile that was a friendly smile, not an amused by a funny little girl smile. We're always glad to be of help. Ramona had not felt so happy since she was in Miss Binny's kindergarten. Too bad Beezus had first dibs on Mr. Cardoza. Ramona might have married him herself someday if she had ever decided to get married. She reached room 1 just as the 2 first grades were returning from recess. She heard someone from room 2 say, Ramona must have hurt her foot. Someone else said, I bet it hurts. She was enjoying the attention her slipper was getting. Ramona began to limp. Oh, there you are, Ramona, said Mrs. Griggs, who was standing by her door to make sure her class entered the room into an orderly manner. Where have you been? We missed you on the playground. I was making a slipper. Ramona looked up at Mrs. Griggs. I didn't want to wear a dirty old boot. She had not felt so brave since the day she started off to first grade. After this, you should ask permission to stay in during recess. Mrs. Griggs looked down at the slipper and said, You have made a very good slipper. Encouraged by this bit of praise, Ramona said, I could make a better slipper if I had scissors and a crayon. I could draw a bunny face on the toe and make ears like a real bunny slipper. Mrs. Griggs' expression was thoughtful. She seemed to be studying Ramona, who shrank inside herself, uncertain as to what her teacher might be about to say. Mrs. Griggs looked more tired than cross, so Ramona summoned her spunk and said, Maybe I could finish my slipper instead of making a Thanksgiving turkey. We always, began Mrs. Griggs, and changed her mind. I don't see why not, she said. Mrs. Griggs approved of her. Ramona smiled with relief and pretended to limp to her seat as her teacher closed the door. She no longer had to dread turkeys or her teacher. The class took out arithmetic workbooks, while Ramona began to count cowboy boots and butterflies and circle the correct number under the pictures. She was busy and happy in the private corner of her mind, planning improvements to her slipper. She would round the heel and toe. She would draw a nose with pink crayon, and eyes too, and cut 2 ears. Ramona's happy thoughts were interrupted by another less happy thought. Her missing brown Oxford. What was her mother going to say when she came home without it? Tell her she was careless? Tell her how much shoes cost these days? Ask her why on earth she didn't go to school the usual way? Because I was feeling full of spunk, Ramona answered in her thoughts. Her father would understand. She hoped her mother would too. Workbooks were collected. Reading circles were next. Prepared to attack words, Ramona limped to a little chair in the front of the room with the rest of her reading group. She felt so much better towards Mrs. Griggs that she was first to raise her hand on almost every question, even though she was worried about her missing Oxford. The reader was more interesting now that her group was attacking bigger words. Fire engine. Ramona read to herself and thought, Pow! You got it. Fire engine. Monkey. Pow! I got you, monkey. The buzz of the little black telephone beside Mrs. Griggs' desk interrupted work in room 1. Everyone wanted to listen to Mrs. Griggs talk to the principal's office, because they might hear something important. Yes, said Mrs. Griggs to the telephone. Yes, we do. With the receiver pressed to her ear, she turned away from the telephone and looked at Ramona. Everyone else in room 1 looked at her too. Now what? Thought Ramona. Now what have I done? All right, said Mrs. Griggs to the telephone. I'll send her along. She replaced the receiver. Room 1, most of all Ramona, waited. Ramona, your shoe is waiting for you in the office, said the teacher. When the dog's owner found it on the lawn, he brought it to school, and the secretary guessed it was a first grade size. You may be excused to go get it. Whew, thought Ramona in great relief as she limped happily off to the office. This day was turning out to be better than she had expected. She accepted her shoe, now interestingly scarred with tooth marks from Mrs. Miller, the school secretary. My goodness, said Mrs. Miller as Ramona shoved her foot into the shoe and tied the lace, still damp from being chewed in a tight she tied in a tight bow. It's a good thing your foot came out of your shoe when that dog got a hold of it. He must have had a pretty big teeth. He did, Ramona assured the secretary. Great big teeth, like a wolf. He chased me. Now that Ramona was safe in her two shoes, she was eager for an audience. He chased me, but I took off my shoe and I threw it at him, and that stopped him. Fancy that! Mrs. Miller was plainly impressed by Ramona's story. You took off your shoe and threw it right at him. You must be a very brave girl. I guess maybe I am, said Ramona, pleased by the accomplishment. Of course she was brave. She had scars on her shoe to prove it. She hoped her mother would not be in too much of a hurry to hide the tooth marks with fresh shoe polish. She hippity hopped, paper slipper in hand, down the hall to show off her scars to room 1. Brave Ramona, that's what they would think. Just about the bravest girl in the first grade. And they would be right. This time, Ramona was sure. The end. This is her, hippity hoppiting with the paper slipper in her hand and her Oxford back on her foot. Right? Oh my goodness, Ramona. Isn't she so crazy? I think we know her character enough by now to have a really good idea of who she is and what she would really be like if she were a real person, right, in real life. Um, she's obviously in first grade, so she's a little younger than you guys. But I'm sure you can think of a kindergartner, or maybe one of you was like this when you were in kindergarten or first grade. She's a great character, isn't she? So starting next week, I'm going to have a new read aloud, and I think you'll like it. I think it's called One Day in the Prairie. I'm not really sure. I don't have it in front of me right now. But it's sort of like an I Survived, but it's really short. And I think it will only last about a week. So I think it's it's a fictional story that's based on like some like realistic things that could actually have happened. Um, I think you'll like it because we're talking about the Oregon Trail and the Louisiana Purchase and that whole westward expansion, right? Um, so I think it will kind of tie into that time with the prairie lands and with all that land and with people settling out west. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. So listen, we have Saturday, Sunday, and Monday because it's Memorial Day. So on Tuesday, I'll have like a Memorial Day video for you that all the fourth grades are showing. But if you can, remember, come to the 11:30 to 12 picnic lunch. If you can't go outside with your device, don't worry about it. You can stay right inside. Maybe set up a towel on your living room floor, or sometimes I do that at dinner. I call it a picnic dinner for my kids, and we just put out a blanket on the living room floor. But if you can go outside with your device, go outside and we can all hang out. I'm going to make a sandwich and take it outside with me at 11:30 so that we can all sort of like have a lunch group together. So if you can do that because it's supposed to be beautiful out. And that's just in a few hours. Okay, so I'm going to post this and then I'll see you guys at 11:30. Try to get there. All right, I miss you so much. I wish we were really getting together. But this is the best that we can do, right? Okay, hugs.